So I read this morning and I thought, wow, what a timely story since Valentine's Day is tomorrow. And this is just the heart of God. In 2 Samuel, it's one of my probably my favorite stories. Hi, Josiah, how's it going? It's about Mephibosheth. Say it with me. Mephibosheth. I mean, isn't that fun to say? Mephibosheth. So it's about Mephibosheth. And you're like, who's Mephibosheth? Well, I'm going to tell you. So it's 2 Samuel 4. There's this random parentheses for all you teachers out there. You like parentheses. So there's this just, in the parentheses, it's just very random. It kind of doesn't really go with what's going on in this story. But then we go 4 chapters later and we realize this is why this guy mentioned this. So 2 Samuel 4, verse 4, it says, Saul's son, Jonathan, and it was King Saul. Okay, so King Saul's son, Jonathan, had a son named Mephibosheth, who was crippled as a child. He was 5 years old when the report came from Jezreel that Saul and Jonathan had been killed in battle. When the child's nurse, so Mephibosheth's nurse, heard the news, she picked him up and fled. But as she hurried away, she dropped him, and he became crippled. And it's been, what's the word? I guess people assume, or just kind of from the facts, they say that the reason why the nurse ran with Mephibosheth and was scared when she heard that Jonathan and Saul was dead is because King Saul was after King David. He wasn't a king yet, but he was after David because King Saul was jealous of David. When Pastor Benita talked about King David, well, he wasn't a king yet. David was killing tens of thousands. And Saul was jealous because all the ladies were dancing in the street and saying, Saul killed his 1,000s, but David killed 10,000s. And so he did not like all the ladies, saying that David was better than him. So King Saul tried to kill David time and time again. And so once Saul and Jonathan had died, this Mephibosheth's nurse was scared because she's like, oh, David's going to be king now, and King Saul was trying to kill David, so David's going to try to kill any of King Saul's sons. Are y'all following me? I know I'm throwing down a lot. Okay, so that makes sense, but what the nurse didn't know is that Jonathan, that's the dad of Mephibosheth, Jonathan had a pact, a commitment, a covenant with David. They were the best of friends. Some people try to say they were homosexual. They were not. Let me set the record straight. Okay? They were not. They had a covenant. And his covenant was unbreakable. And it's just like the love of God. So I'm just going to read 2 Samuel 8 real quick. Thank you guys for your patience and bearing with me. But I thought this was what God wanted me to share since you were talking about there's a lot of people out there feeling unworthy. This goes with that. I said chapter 8. I meant chapter 9. Okay, we'll start with verse 1. It says, one day David asked, and now David is king, and he says, one day David asked, is anyone in Saul's family still alive? Anyone to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? It's such like the heart of the Father. He is chasing after people who are totally away from him, wanting to lavish kindness on them. The worst of the worst, God is wanting to lavish his kindness on them. And he says, is there anyone to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? He summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. Are you Ziba, the king asked? Yes, I am, Ziba replied. The king then asked him, is anyone still alive from Saul's family? If so, he says it again, I want to show God's kindness to them. Ziba replied, yes, one of Jonathan's sons is still alive. He is crippled in both feet. That did not scare David away. It's kind of like, why did you have to label him like that? Okay, so he's crippled. I guess he thought, well, you probably don't want anything to do with him because he's crippled, Maybe that's what he thought. Did not deter King David at all. He said, where is he? In Lodabar. Lodabar means place of the dogs. It was the dirtiest, worstest of the worst where people lived. It was the ghetto. It was across the tracks. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, if you live across the tracks, don't feel bad. So did Mephibosheth. All right. God is calling you out. All right. In Lodabar, Ziba told him, at the home of Makar, whatever. So David sent for him and brought him from Makar's home. His name was Mephibosheth, and he was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. When he came to David, he is freaking out. He's like, my grandfather tried to kill this man, and now I'm being summoned? What? Like, can you imagine? He's probably freaking out. He's been hiding out in Lodabar all this time, and he's like, oh my God, he's going to say off with my head or something. Who knows what's going through his mind, but that's probably what's going through his mind. But David said, greetings, Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth replied, I am your servant. David said, don't be afraid. I intend to show kindness to you because of my promise. Say promise. Promise to your father, Jonathan. I will give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather, Saul, and you will eat here with me at the king's table. Say king's table. This is you, guys, this is you. Mephibosheth bowed respectfully and exclaimed, who is your servant that you should show such kindness to a dead dog like me? Okay, he has an identity problem. He doesn't know who he is yet. He doesn't realize the promise that his dad, Jonathan, and King David had. He sees himself as nothing but a dead dog, low life, good for nothing. This is how he's looking at himself. This is not how God sees us, okay? It's not how God sees you. Then the king summoned Saul's servant Ziba and said, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and servants are to farm the land for him to produce food. Man, this is blessing upon blessing here. To produce food for your master's household. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will eat here at my table. And then Ziba agrees. And then it says that Mephibosheth had a young son, and he ate at the king's table all of his days. And what's interesting is Mephibosheth came in thinking he was a lowlife. And he could have rejected the proposition that King David was putting forth. He could say, no, I'm not worthy to receive this. I'm not going to live there. I'm going to go back to Lodabar because that's where I belong. I belong with those people. But no, he accepted the loving kindness of God. And on this Valentine's Day weekend, that's what the Lord is saying to you. Just accept. Did Mephibosheth have to do anything to earn his position at the king's table? Not a thing. Not one thing. He just had to receive it. He had to receive it. He could have walked away and said, I'm trash. I cannot be at your table. The good news is when you go into the kingdom, they're going to put on royal robes on you. They're going to take all the nasty garments off. You don't have to do that. The king will do that for you. God will do that for you. But you have to step into the kingdom. Amen? So if anybody's listening now that hasn't received the Lord, just say, Jesus, be my Lord. Make my mess a message for your kingdom. Amen?